right, we're going to look at a couple extra examples for section 4.4, linear models and point slope form. All right, so this question says, the cost of a taxi ride is determined by the distance traveled as shown in the graph. Find and interpret the C-intercept. All right, so if you look on the graph, this is D and this is C. So instead of using X and Y, they're just using different variables. So C represents the cost and D represents the distance in this problem. All right, so it says find and interpret the cost, or the, sorry, not the cost, the C-intercept. All right, so if we see this goes from 0 to 6 to 12, and it's skipping one, so that means this must be 3, 6, 9, 12, 15, 18, etc. All right, and if we look at the scale on the bottom, since this is 2, this is going to be 1. And then this is going to be 3, 4, 5, this will be 7, etc. All right, so that just gives us a little bit more information, making sure that we understand the graph that we're given. All right, so it says find and interpret the C-intercept. So the C-intercept here is between 3 and 6. It's a little bit closer to 3 than 6. Looks like it's about a third of the way up through there. So we're going to say the C-intercept is 4. Since it's on the column with cost, we're going to say it's $4. And what does that represent? That represents the base fare, or the least amount of money to take a taxi ride. Okay, so just put base fare or base cost. All right, it says find and interpret the slope. All right, so we've been looking at slope in other lessons. So we're going to take 2 points here. Let's use the point that we just determined was 0, 4. And another point on the graph is 8, 18. And we can find the slope from this. So we're going to do 18 minus 4 over 8 minus 0. So we got 14 over 8. And if we reduce that, it's 7 over 4. Now, what does that actually mean? So that's 7 over 4 is our slope. And we need to interpret that. All right, to interpret that, all right, we're talking about money, distance and money. So what does 7/4 relate to? All right, so there's 4 quarters in $1 and then 3/4 of another dollar. So this actually equals like $1.75. Okay, so 7 quarters is $1.75. So 7/4 is going to be $1.75 per mile, because we're doing miles down here. So 1.75 per mile. You're not going to be able to read my writing here, so that's just per mile. All right, the next part says write a linear function, C of D, that models this situation. All right, so we're going to call it C of D. That's just the name of the function. So C of D. We just found the slope to be $1.75 per mile. So we called mile, we're calling that D for distance. And then we said the y-intercept, or the initial value, is 4. All right. Define a reasonable domain for the function. All right, your domain is number of miles traveled by the taxi cab. So a reasonable domain would be anything greater or equal to 0. So however you want to write that is fine, but you can't have a negative distance. So you're not going to take a taxi ride -2 miles. It has to be anything greater than 0. So, and you could take a taxi ride all day long. Like, you know, there's no real kind of limit, not that you'd want to because it costs a lot of money, but you could take a taxi ride for a long time. And any way you want to explain that is fine. All right, so what does the value C of 15 represent in this situation? So 15 is D. So that's your distance, okay? So that'd be 15 miles. So C of 15 would just mean how much money it costs to take a taxi ride for 15 miles. And you could find that by simply plugging 15 into the function and finding the answer to that. All right, so what does this value represent? It represents the cost of a 15-mile taxi ride. I actually wrote the equation, but it represents the cost of a 15-mile taxi ride. All right, it says use point-slope form of a linear equation to write an equation of a line. All right, point-slope form, y minus y1 equals m times x minus x1. And we've seen how this comes from the slope formula, and we're just going to use that to write an equation. So y, we know this is our slope, and we know this is our x and y from our first point. All right, so it's going to be two variables are still going to be left in it, our x and our y. So we're going to have y minus y1, which is -2, so that becomes +2, equals m, which is 4, times x minus our x1, which is 3. All right, so you can take this and distribute. So I'm going to have y plus 2 equals 4x minus 12. And then if I subtract 2, that puts it in slope-intercept form, which is what we use a lot of the time. Okay, so this is point-slope form, and this is slope-intercept form. All right, so the next one, y minus, again, this is x and y from our first point. So y minus 2 equals our slope times x minus 0. And then again, we're going to distribute. We're just going to put it in a nicer form. Point slope is necessary sometimes when we have the point and the slope to write it as an equation, but it's not always the prettiest or easiest equation to use. So we often manipulate it and put it into point slope form. All right, so again, point slope form, and this is slope intercept form. All right, let's look at a couple more examples. And this time we're given 2 points. All right, so it still says to write in point slope form, but we can't go straight to point slope form because we don't have a slope. But we do know if we're given 2 points, we can find the slope. So let's find the slope. So -3 minus a -2 is +2. 5 minus 4. And we're going to have -3 plus 2 is -1 over 1, which is -1. So now we have a slope. And we can choose one of these points. Since we use this as x and y1 and this is x and y of 2, we'll continue to use this as our first point. Okay, so we're going to have y minus y, which is +2 again, equals our slope, times x minus our x, which is 4. Now we're going to distribute that -1, so it's going to be -1x plus 4. Subtract 2, y equals -x plus 2. All right, same thing over here. If we've got x and y1, we've got x and y of our second point. We can find our slope, so we're going to do 11 minus 4, and then 9 minus 6. 11 minus 4 is what? 7 over 3. So our slope is going to be 7/3. So we're going to have m equals 7/3, and then y minus y1 is 4 equals our slope times x minus our x1. Alright, so we've got y minus 4 equals 7/3 x. And then here we're going to multiply the numerator because that's like 6/1. So we're going to have negative 40, 2/3. And let's see, 3 goes into 4. I think that reduces. So that's going to be negative 14. Alright, I think I got my pen working again. Alright, so negative 42, 3 goes into 4, negative 1 time, 1 left over, 3 goes into 12, 4 times. So that becomes negative 14. And then we add 4 to both sides. Y equals 7/3 x minus 10. And so that's it. So again, we started with point slope form, which is what it asks us to, and then we quickly turn that into slope intercept form. So sometimes if it just says write an equation, sometimes you can stop here, but a lot of times they ask you to continue to write it in slope intercept form. So I wanted to make sure I showed you how to do that. Alright, I went through these kind of quickly, so if you need to go back through and rewatch it or stop, pause it, and take notes, please do so. And if you have questions, please let me know.